Shalom, shalom. I'm so glad you've joined me today. Thank you for joining me today and every week as we get together and do a Q&A on whatever the health topic is for the week. And this week was unfortunately inspired by a dear friend of mine who's having a serious issue with her tooth. And so I wanted to release this information for the community at large. This will be probably a part one of a couple in a series because it's a lot to process. We're going to be going through what it takes naturally to help heal an abscess and an ongoing potential cavity naturally. And if you saw in the thumbnail, it's based on Ramiel Nagel's book, which is based on Weston A. Price. And we're going to talk about that. But stick around until the end. And typically these live streams go about 30 minutes, depending upon questions. If you guys bring questions to the floor, it takes a little longer, but that is absolutely fine. Feel free to post your questions in the comments and I will get to them. So let's get into it. Our family's journey, if you've been watching any of the videos, will show you that we have healed a lot of things naturally. And as a disclaimer, I am not a licensed medical doctor. We have just spent thousands of dollars and thousands of, well, hundreds of hours learning how God's community, how his world works. And what that has given us is a resource to heal ourselves. And it has ranged everywhere from emotionally and mentally to physically, even spiritually. And the real intense part of our journey actually started with my teeth. This was maybe 5 years ago. And I had an abscess that had developed. And it was very painful. And I do not like pain. As a matter of fact, I'm dealing with something like that right now. But I do not like pain. And it is what actually propelled me to look for another option. At the time, we were going to, we had just moved and we had not established ourselves with a dentist here. And so we were on the lookout for a more natural dentist because we were already on that journey. And so I looked for one and I went in and they did, I didn't have them do any x-rays because I didn't want the added radiation. But she did examine my tooth in a more mechanical way with a tuning fork, which is pretty painful, but at least it avoided radiation and further damage. And she said, "Oh, you have an abscess, you have root damage, and we won't know how much. We may have to pull it, but we potentially could just do a root canal." Well, at the time, I knew enough to know that root canals typically do not end well. They typically harbor bacteria in them that just can't be seen, even with the ozone that they put in nowadays. And so I did not want to go that route. I also did not want an appendage pulled out of my body. And I did truly feel that was an appendage. Our teeth are something the Father put there for a reason. And when you take one out, you don't have a lot of options. You either have to put a man-made one in, which comes with it many issues because of the materials, or you just have to deal with a hole that eventually your bite will change and the teeth will move to adjust and to fill in that gap. And that also can cause issues. So my ultimate goal was to keep that tooth. My husband reminded me of a book by Ramiel Nagel. It had been introduced to me years prior and I hadn't been ready to process it. It's called Heal Tooth Decay Naturally. And it's in the thumbnail if you've seen it, or if you've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the book cover. And I would highly recommend getting that. If nothing else, it's an amazing tool for even if you don't have tooth decay now, for down the road. Because the suggestions he makes in it, number one, for acute pain, they work. We have all experienced it within 12 to 24 hours if we follow what he says to do. It takes away the pain and begins to heal. But it also is important for your overall nutrition, because everything he recommends in it is really how we should be eating all the time. And the reason we get tooth decay is because of what we eat. And it's not as simple as, oh, you didn't brush your teeth and those sugar bugs stayed on your teeth and started eating away at your teeth. It's not that simple. Sugar definitely feeds inflammation. And that's really any kind of sugar, whether it's coconut sugar, even maple syrup. I would even say if you use too much of it, honey. These are the good sugars that we use regularly. Now, white processed sugar and brown sugar, those are 100%. They should be off the table. You should never eat them because they will cause tooth decay, period, end of story. So those are the things that actively harm your teeth. But then on the other side of that is, how are you rebuilding your teeth? What is your body using to rebuild? And so it's kind of a two-part situation. And that's exactly the way it is with our bodies. We have the toxic things that we put in our bodies that, yes, we can get rid of. But then what are we putting in our bodies to rebuild it? Now, these bodies were the only bodies given to us. And the Father tells us they are a temple of the Holy Spirit. So we need to treat them as such. We need to treat them with respect and give them what they need to be profitable in his kingdom, right? So let's get to that. So what we talk about all the time on this channel is health and healing, good food for your bodies. And when you are in an acute situation with your teeth, when all of a sudden they flare up and they hurt so bad, think back to what you've been eating over the last week, maybe 2. Typically, that will reveal what pushed your body over the edge, opened up whatever it is in your body, in your teeth, in your mouth, that is causing that pain. The things to avoid when you are in that acute situation are all sugars, all fruits, all grains, white potatoes, and corn. Those are the big 5. Stay away from them 100% during the first 24 to 48 hours of that acute pain. Once you eliminate that from your diet, for that time period at least, start replacing it with good things that rebuild. And then we can also talk about the things that fight the pain and infection. So first, the things that rebuild are proteins and vegetables that have a lot of good minerals, the micro minerals in them and nutrients. And then fermented foods are amazing. So even as simple as sauerkraut and kefir, drink lots of raw milk. We've already talked about how store-bought dairy is very inflammatory. So sticking to raw dairy products, but having a lot of them, because that has calcium in it. And what are your teeth made from? Calcium. So that helps your body rebuild. Those are like the core things that help with rebuilding. There are a few outliers that you can add in. They may be too sweet, and listen to your body when you eat them. Sweet potatoes, I was asked about that this week. I know they're nice and soft, and typically even with your normal diet, you can have them. See what your body says when you have a sweet potato with your abscess or with your toothache. If it hurts, don't eat it. But if you are going to eat it with good grass-fed butter. Butter is kind of the only exception as far as purchasing it from the store, and for it not being raw. Unless you're making it yourself, it's really very difficult to find raw butter. So as long as it's grass-fed and organic, you're getting good stuff, and that's okay. So the core of your diet during this time should be fermented foods, raw dairy, beef, chicken, fish, raw eggs in the green everyday smoothie we talked about. I'll put a link to that after the live stream is done. We've done a video about the green smoothie. And honestly, if you're in a lot of pain, you may not want to drink or eat more than just a liquid diet. And so if all you're drinking or all you're eating is a green everyday smoothie with raw milk, you're doing good for yourself. That's fine. Stick to that until the pain goes down. Typically, when you have an abscess, your mouth is swollen, and so your tooth has descended beyond the natural bite line. And so every time you bite down, you're pushing it back up into that very painful gum. And so it's just incredibly painful as a result. So in order to combat that, eating soft foods or a liquid diet is really good. Plain yogurts, you can make plain yogurt at home so easily. I will also put a link in here for the Real Milk. I think it's realmilk.com. You can find where locally you can get raw milk. That's a great resource. And yes, it's more expensive, but guess what? You get what you pay for. And if you've stopped buying processed foods and, the dairy from the store, you've really reduced your weekly purchases quite a bit and freed up funds to spend a little bit more in other areas that are actually life-giving. The other thing you should avoid during these acute periods especially is processed food. Even if it, is using good oils and say it's like cassava instead of actual grains, if it's been processed in a factory, don't eat it. And the reason is that when you're in acute periods like this, you want every single bite that goes in your body to be healing you. You don't want to have wasted calories, so to speak. You don't want filler, because every time you don't take advantage of that, you are delaying your healing. Don't delay your healing. Just stick to it. One of the things that my husband tells me I am unique in is that I am very tenacious. And when I know that there is a right way of doing things, I do it. And I make sure it gets done. And I know everyone is not like that. And I know even he is not like that. He is one that's more like, well, I'm going to do what I need to do to heal. And, there can be exceptions. I don't make exceptions. Because I want to get to the finish line as soon as possible. That's my mentality. Get to the finish line as soon as possible. And so I know in order to do that, I have to strip aside everything that entangles me, right? Isn't that what scripture says? So we've talked about those things that are life-giving during these times. We've talked about those things that we should get rid of. Now let's also talk about the things that can heal and help with the pain, because typically the pain is pretty high. It's very acute. Having pain in your mouth and your head is one of the worst areas to have it because it's so close to your brain. And so your body perceives it as maybe even more acute and more painful than if you were to have, cut off a toe or something far away from your brain. So let's talk about that. First and foremost, and actually mainstream dentistry used to use this technique whenever they even pulled a tooth. They would use clove oil. Now, make sure that you're using a good therapeutic grade clove oil. There are a few resources for that. The one we chose is doTERRA, and I can put another link for that. For the replays, you'll see that, and I'll also put one in the description. You can take a look at my website for that, and if you order through my website, I will receive a little bit of a thank you from doTERRA. But just be careful who you do purchase that from, because you can get it on places like Amazon and online, but there's no guarantee that it hasn't been tampered with. So just be careful with that. You want a reputable source. So we use doTERRA clove. And the way even dentists used to use it is they'd put it on some gauze or a cotton ball, and they'd put it right up in that cavity that they had just extracted the tooth from. Well, you can do the same thing for wherever your tooth is bothering you. You put the clove oil on it. A second really effective way of diminishing the pain is doing coconut oil swishing. And if you've never done it before, it might feel kind of weird or gross, but it is very effective in diminishing pain, really like nothing else. And so you just make sure it's an unrefined, organic coconut oil. What it does is it pulls the toxins out. And there have been people, I actually just received a testimony about oil pulling from someone this week, that he said that he did it for the first time, and all of a sudden just his entire mouth just like exploded with abscesses where he didn't have any previously. That's because the coconut oil was pulling out the toxins that were in his teeth. And that's a good thing. It can be painful for a while, but it's a good thing because it's ridding your body of things that it was already knowing it shouldn't be in there. So, just as a sidebar, the natural way of doing things is the harder way. We're not giving you a pill that you can take. We're not taking the pain away like that, where we remove the body part that's hurting you. What it is it's getting to the root, no pun intended, the root of what's causing the problem, and it's getting rid of that so that you can live a full, healthy, productive life. That takes time. It takes time if you're doing it for your body, your physical body, and it takes time if you're doing it for your spiritual body. Think about those bad habits that we have ingrained in us, responses that we give over and over, that we shouldn't be responding that way to people, and yet we do. Removing that and replacing it with something good is a painful and long process at times. So know that when you are choosing the natural way, it is not the easy path, but it is long-term the best path, because it is not putting more toxins in your body. It's not removing things that God intended for you to have in your body to give you long life. It is addressing the root issue and saying, I see that issue. I see that problem. Let's root it out, no pun intended, and let's deal with it. So it's a path, it's a journey, and it's painful, but it's good. And in the end, you will be stronger as you work through this. So going back to oil pulling is a great way to do this, is to pull out those toxins. We would usually, you can put a drop of clove oil in the little teaspoon of coconut oil that you put in your mouth. Arbor Vitae is actually a pretty expensive oil, but if you have access to it, my husband found great relief with it. Just one drop in your coconut oil, you put it in your mouth, and you swish it around. You let it melt, and then you swish back and forth for at least 5 minutes, and then you spit it into the toilet because you don't want to line your pipes with it. But what you'll find is that really soothes whatever is going on in your mouth, and it will also help pull out toxins. Warm salt water swishing. is also helpful. Be careful of the salt that you're using. And the reason I say that is there are salts out there that have high metal content in them. I believe Himalayan salt is one of those, which is really a bummer, because those of us that were trying to come away from, lab produced salts, that's probably the most mainstream. Himalayan peak salt is one of the most mainstream that we all go to or went to. And then to come to find out that it has a high metal content was really tough. So we have now gone to real salt. It's called real salt. And it comes from, I think, Utah, from the Great Salt Lake. And it is apparently very clean. If you have other recommendations, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Azure Standard is where we order a lot of our bulk foods, and they have a lot of interesting salts. And actually, they have the scientific, nutritional content of each of them as well, which is really cool. You can go on there and you can click on any individual salt and you can see what minerals they have in them. And if there are any metals, if they're tested for metals, that kind of thing. So that is an amazing resource. I will put a link to that as well in the description. So warm saltwater swishing is really good. And I think the last thing that really helped with pain for me and my husband and our family was black tea bags. And do be careful, because many tea bags have heavy metals in them, microplastics. But if you're getting an organic tea bag that has been tested, or that you are bagging it yourself, you're putting it in just some gauze, black tea is a very effective way of pulling out abscess infection and helping with that. And to be completely transparent, we have both had very severe abscesses. My husband had one that went down into the bone of his jaw. I had one the dentist said was going up into the roots and it was spreading. And we have both dealt with those abscesses completely naturally. Yes, they were painful for a day or two, but the swelling came down, the infection released, it disappeared, and then we were able to start healing them and eating what we knew was good for them. When you are healing an abscess, aside from the pain, you're wanting to get rid of the infection and start healing that bone. And teeth can absolutely heal. Cavities can absolutely heal with the right food. And my littles can attest to that. We've seen cavities of theirs heal over where they were like black and then they turned kind of a gray. They never turn all white again, unfortunately, because they've been damaged, but they can heal. And then thankfully they've all been baby teeth and they can fall out and they get new ones. And then we let them know, look, that painful cavity that you had, it's as a result of what you're eating, and don't do the same thing with your adult teeth. So that is our transparency. We have walked this road before. We know what it's like. So let's see, the infection. We use homemade colloidal silver if you're able to get your hands on that or make it yourself. Short of that, purchasing it and using that in your saltwater swish is very effective. That helps with killing the bacteria. If you're just doing a saltwater swish, you can actually add hydrogen peroxide to that. I don't typically recommend any kind of lab-made products, but hydrogen peroxide is one of the few holdouts of that in our home at the moment. Let me think. There was one other thing, I think, for infection. Maybe that was what it was. It was just the colloidal silver. If it comes to me, I'll mention it. But so yeah, that is how we have combated our infections and the abscesses. And then going forward, we've been working with Dr. Brett Spradlin at Divine Design Natural Health. I'll put a link to it as well. They have taught us a lot about detoxing and healing. And one of the things that's very effective for pain, number one, in your head is PEMF treatments. And it's like a table, basically, or you can get paddles. If you go to a practitioner, they can help you with that treatment. We have an at-home unit that we rent from them occasionally when we have acute pain from different things. And it basically is a concentrated amount of PEMF, electromagnetic frequencies, that God made in this earth to heal us, but it's a concentrated amount. And so you direct that at wherever on your body is hurting, and it helps with the pain. It also helps heal because it stimulates those cells in those areas. And it's so interesting when you lay on a PEMF table, you may not even know that you have issues in your body, but you will feel the PEMF go to different parts of your body that need to be healed. And it's a trigger for you. You should be thinking, those are parts of my body that are needing to be healed, and I need to be careful with my diet. I need to be careful with what I'm surrounding myself with. So the PEMF helps a lot with pain. It helps with healing. What also helps with healing that is incredible for bone healing and nerve regeneration especially are cold lasers. And that is something I don't know, not red laser, but cold laser. Red laser is what many women purchase for surface healing of their skin. Cold laser looks like red laser, but it goes deep down into the tissues, into the bone, and it heals things that we can't see or easily have access to. And so I've been using a cold laser on my tooth area every time I go in to see the doctor, our practitioner, our naturopath. Or if we rent the PEMF, we also get a cold laser to use. So, yeah, so just to recap, or just to kind of wrap this up, I have a tooth, and I have a few teeth that I've had cavities in over the years. One of my teeth specifically, that filling has completely fallen out of, and it left about 2/3 of a tooth left. And that's the tooth that I had a lot of pain in and abscess in and healed it about 3 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago, I guess now. And it still remains a partial tooth. And I refuse to have it pulled out of my head because God put it there for a reason. I pray over this tooth. I speak life to this tooth and these nerves, and I treat it as though it is still healing. And you know, when I'm eating a little bit too much honey or coconut sugar in my diet, I feel it in that tooth, in those roots. And it doesn't turn into an abscess, but it does become sensitive. And that is a reminder to me that I need to keep treating this temple, this body, like his temple. One of the things that has really helped me through the years is thinking about how God's people would have eaten. And it would have been much different than the American diet. We are here in the diaspora, so this is what we have learned. But I think there is a lot to learn looking back in scripture and looking at history and tradition to see what God's people have eaten. Traditionally, they would not have eaten a lot of sugar, especially processed sugar. They would have had honey at times, but mostly around the high holy days, maybe the weekly Shabbat. And so we try to really limit our sweet treats to those times, to just the weekly Sabbath or the high holy days that the Father has given us to celebrate on. You know, if money is tight, oftentimes we don't have the more expensive meats except on the weekly Shabbat. So like steaks, we'll go ahead and have ground beef throughout the week. But then as far as like roasts and steaks and lamb leg, those are for the feasts and the high holy days. So we've tried to kind of orient our mind to the culture that God wants us to be a part of, not our American culture, but God's culture and his people's culture, because he handed down these traditions to them to bless the generations after. So I hope that you have found today helpful. I hope that some of these resources resonate with you and that you are encouraged that you absolutely can heal tooth decay naturally. You do not have to go the way of mainstream. Don't be afraid. God has provided everything you need for life and godliness and to have a long life. I pray that you are not perishing for lack of knowledge, that you go out and you ask the Father for that knowledge and that insight and that wisdom to heal whatever it is that is going on in your body naturally. Know that the Father's healing, if not supernatural and immediate, is still not going to have a side of it that is going to harm you further. If any quote unquote solution is given to you, look for the hidden harm, because that is how Hasatan, how the devil hurts God's people, how he comes to steal, kill, and destroy, is he hands us solutions that look like a solution, that have some positive to them, but also have negative. Look for solutions that don't have that negative, because that is of God. He has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Our Father does not. So our Father has always taught not to mix and mingle, not to let there be any overlap of good and bad. It's one or the other. He spits out the lukewarm. He does not want that. It's good or bad, black and white. So if there is something that you've been told, oh, this will solve your problem, but it also creates another problem, I would question that. And I would ask the Father, Father, is this really the direction you want me to go? And if it isn't, show me another way. This is another way. This is not mainstream. This is the Father's way. This is the long term. Maybe, having to deal with a little bit more pain for a while, because he presses us before that beautiful oil comes out. I hope you are greatly encouraged by this, brethren. I love you dearly, and thank you for joining me today, or whenever you see this video. I hope it is an encouragement. Please post your questions in the comments. Subscribe if you would like to see future Health Watchers. We go live every Wednesday at noon, and every week is a different topic based on the health issues that we've seen come up in our community and the knowledge that the Father has given our family. I pray that you have a blessed week going forth, and until next time, shalom, shalom.